100 days of detention, $130 million in fines. In 2018, state authorities removed Fan Bingbing from public view. She was held in a designated location for 3 months, cut off from outside contact. Her return was conditional on a single requirement: paying the largest financial penalty in the history of the industry. Yet this staggering figure was not merely a fine. It was the final invoice for a decade of unchecked intoxication. But this appetite for excess was not random. It was a violent reaction to the strict discipline of her origins. Born in 1981 in the port city of Qingdao, Fan Bingbing entered a world defined by survival, not luxury. Her parents were artists, a singer and a dancer, but the family was not wealthy. They were part of a generation that had survived the Cultural Revolution, people who understood the value of keeping one's head down. But Fan was different. Even as a child, she possessed a magnetism that was impossible to ignore. She studied the flute and piano, adhering to the strict discipline expected of Chinese children. But her ambition lay elsewhere. Her entry into the public consciousness came in 1998 with a hit Taiwanese drama called My Fair Princess, Huanzhugeja. It was a phenomenon, sweeping across Asia with the intensity of Friends or Game of Thrones. But here is the crucial detail that defines her early struggle. She was not the star. She played Jinsuo, the loyal, suffering handmaiden to the princess. In the brutal hierarchy of Chinese celebrity, being a supporting actor is often a life sentence. You are the furniture, not the focus. You are there to make the lead look good. But Fan had something that her contemporaries did not. She had a hunger that was almost terrifying. While the main stars of the show enjoyed their instant fame, Fan Bingbing went to work. She possessed a work ethic that became legendary in Beijing. There were years where she filmed 5, 6, 7 movies back to back. She slept in vans. She ate boxed lunches standing up. She famously said, "I can take the criticism. How much praise you can withstand is directly proportional to how much slander you can endure." She was building armor. She was refusing to be defined by her role as a servant. She was determined to become the master. By 2007, she did something unheard of for a young actress in the Chinese system. At that time, the entertainment industry was controlled by powerful state-connected management companies like Huai Brothers. These companies operated like the old Hollywood studio system. They owned you. They decided what you wore, what you ate, and who you dated. When Fan's contract with Huai Brothers expired, she did not renew it. Instead, she struck out on her own. She founded Fan Bingbing Studio. She was 26 years old. This was the turning point. She was no longer an employee. She was the boss. She began producing her own TV shows, massive historical epics where she cast herself not as the handmaiden, but as the empress. The metaphor was not subtle. In The Empress of China, she played Wu Zetian, the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor in her own right. Life was imitating art. However, there was a warning sign hidden in this triumph, a tremor that Fan ignored. In late 2014, The Empress of China was abruptly pulled from broadcast just days after its premiere. The censors claimed the costumes were too revealing, displaying too much cleavage. When the show returned to air, it had been butchered. Every shot was zoomed in tightly to crop out the actress's chest, turning a visual masterpiece into a collection of floating heads. Western media laughed at the prudishness, but they missed the point. It wasn't about modesty, it was about control. The party was physically editing her body before they edited her career. Fan treated it as a production hiccup. She should have seen it as a political threat. Fan Bingbing was consolidating power. She was securing endorsements that commanded millions of dollars. She was investing in real estate, in wineries in Canada, in tech startups. She was becoming an institution. The Chinese public gave her a nickname, Fan Ye. Ye is a term from Old Beijing dialect. It translates roughly to master or grandfather. It is a term of respect historically reserved for powerful, somewhat bandit-like men. To call a beautiful woman Fan Ye was a cultural seismic shift. It acknowledged that she had transcended her gender. She wasn't just a pretty face to be married off to a tycoon. When a reporter famously asked her if she hoped to marry into a wealthy family, her response became the slogan of a generation of Chinese women. "I don't need to marry a rich man. I am the rich man." It was brilliant branding. It was empowering. But in a country governed by a party that values humility and collective success above individual glory, it was also dangerous. It was a declaration of independence in a system that does not tolerate independence. It was a statement that placed the individual above the collective, the I above the we. If there was a specific moment where Fan Bingbing cemented her status as a global icon, and perhaps unwittingly painted a target on her back, it was May 12th, 2010. The location was the Cannes Film Festival. She stepped onto the red carpet wearing a gown designed by Lawrence Shu. It was yellow. It was embroidered with massive Chinese dragons and crashing waves. To a Western eye, it was just a stunning dress, but the cultural coding was screaming. In Imperial China, imperial yellow and the dragon motif were strictly reserved for the emperor. For a commoner to wear them was punishable by death. By wearing that dress, Fan Bingbing was presenting herself to the West as the personification of China itself. She was wrapping herself in the flag, in the history, in the imperial authority. Domestic media in China went wild. Some called it patriotic, others called it arrogant, but it worked. Hollywood noticed, the luxury brands noticed. From that moment on, Fan Bingbing was everywhere. She became a fixture at international fashion weeks. She was the bridge between East and West. Western studios, desperate to crack the Chinese market, cast her in their franchises. In X-Men, she had few lines, but her presence guaranteed box office returns in Shanghai and Beijing. By 2017, she was untouchable. She served on the jury of the Cannes Film Festival, sitting alongside Pedro Almodovar and Will Smith. She was named to the Time 100 list of most influential people. Her annual reported income was hovering around $45 million, making her one of the highest paid actresses in the world, earning more than Charlize Theron or Emma Stone. She lived a life of unimaginable luxury. She owned apartments in Beijing's most exclusive districts. She had a fleet of luxury cars. She was dating Li Chen, a famous actor, and they were the power couple of the nation. They were the Chinese equivalent of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Every move they made was documented, analyzed, and adored. She was the queen. But while Fan Bingbing was conquering Cannes, the ground beneath her feet in Beijing was shifting. Since 2012, President Xi Jinping had been consolidating power with a ferocious anti-corruption campaign. It started with government officials, the tigers and flies. Generals were arrested. Party secretaries were jailed. Billions of yuan in illicit assets were seized. For the first few years, the entertainment industry felt safe. They thought they were the court jesters, immune to the political purges. They thought their job was to distract the masses, and as long as they made money and didn't criticize the party, they were safe. By 2018, the wind had changed. The government began to speak about moral decay. They spoke about celebrities who were paid too much, who worshipped Western values, who were spiritually empty. Inequality in China was rising. The sight of actresses making millions for a few days of work, while the average worker struggled, was becoming a political liability. The party needed a scapegoat. They needed to send a message that would terrify the entire industry. They didn't want a small fish. They wanted a leviathan. Fan Bingbing, sitting atop her mountain of gold, blinded by the flashbulbs, did not see the net closing. She operated in a world of yin and yang contracts, a common secret in the Chinese film industry, where actors would sign two contracts for the same job, one with a lower salary to show the tax man, and one with the real much higher salary to put in the bank. It was a practice everyone knew about, a practice everyone engaged in. It was the way business was done. She likely believed that her fame was a shield. She likely believed that she was too big to fail. The machinery of her evasion was located 3,000 kilometers west of Beijing, in a dusty border town called Korgos. This was a trade hub designated by the state for the Belt and Road Initiative, offering 5 years of tax-free status to attract development. Fan Bingbing turned this policy into a personal gold mine. She registered shell companies in this desert ghost town, companies with no staff and no offices, solely to funnel her income. It was the Cayman Islands with Chinese characteristics. The irony is sharp. The state created the loophole to boost the economy, and when Fan Bingbing used it too effectively, they decided to close it around her neck. In the spring of 2018, Fan Bingbing was preparing for her next big project. She was filming Cell Phone 2, a sequel to a popular movie. She posted photos on Weibo, smiling, looking confident. She was the picture of success. She did not know that a disgruntled former TV host named Qui Yongyuan was sitting in his study, seething with anger over a personal vendetta involving that very movie. She did not know that he was opening a drawer in his desk, pulling out a stack of papers that would burn her empire to the ground. The stage was set. The Empress was about to fall, and the world was about to watch a magic trick, the disappearance of a superstar. The spark that ignited the inferno did not come from a grand state investigation or a sophisticated sting operation by the police. It came from a much pettier, more human place, a personal grudge. His name is Qui Yongyuan. In the ecosystem of Chinese media, Qui was the antithesis of Fan Bingbing. He was not a glamour icon. He was a former anchor for CCTV, the state broadcaster. He was known for his sharp tongue, his social commentary, and his self-presentation as a voice of moral conscience. He was an intellectual, a man of words, not images. And for 15 years, he had been nursing a deep, festering wound. The origin of this wound was a 2003 film called Cell Phone. In that movie, Fan Bingbing played the mistress of a television host. The character of the host was widely believed to be based on Qui Yongyuan. The film portrayed the host as a hypocrite, a man who smiled at the public while cheating on his wife and lying to his colleagues. QE was humiliated. He felt the film had slandered his reputation and caused him genuine psychological distress. For years, he spoke out against the director, Feng Xiaogong, and the writer Liu Jinyun. But time passed and the controversy faded until 2018. In early 2018, it was announced that the same director and the same cast, including Fan Bingbing, were reuniting to film Cell Phone 2. For Qui Yongyuan, this was not just a movie sequel. It was a renewed declaration of war. It was a reopening of the scar. He saw Fan Bingbing posting happily on Weibo about the production, flaunting her new haircut for the role, and something in him snapped. He decided that if they were going to profit from his pain, he would expose the rot at the heart of their industry. On May 28, 2018, Qui Yongyuan logged onto Weibo and posted a series of images. At first glance, they looked boring, just photos of stacks of paper. They were contracts. The first image showed a contract for Fan Bingbing. It detailed a payment of 10 million RMB, roughly 1.5 million US dollars, for 4 days of work. In the caption, Kui wrote sarcastically, "You don't have to act too hard for this much money." The internet buzzed. $1 million for 4 days of work was an astronomical sum to the average Chinese citizen, who might earn $10,000 in a year. It sparked an immediate debate about income inequality. But Kui was not done. A day later, he dropped the hammer. He posted a second contract. This one was for the exact same job, for the exact same 4 days of work. But the amount listed was not 10 million RMB, it was 50 million RMB. Here was the undeniable proof of the yin-yang practice. One contract for the taxman and a secret one for the bank. The 10 million was the lie. The 50 million was the truth. The math was simple and devastating. Fan Bingbing was allegedly taking home 60 million RMB, nearly 10 million USD, for a long weekend of work, but paying taxes on only a fraction of it. The accusation was no longer just about morality. It was about criminality. It was about stealing from the state. The reaction was instantaneous and nuclear. In the West, a celebrity tax scandal is often treated with cynicism. We make jokes about Wesley Snipes or Shakira. But in China, the context is different. The Communist Party derives its legitimacy from the promise of fairness and social stability. The gap between the rich and the poor is a sensitive, volatile subject. When Kui Yongyuan exposed these numbers, he tapped into a deep vein of public resentment. The internet exploded with rage. Why should a factory worker pay their taxes while Fan Ye kept millions? The narrative shifted overnight. Fan Bingbing was no longer the pride of China. She was a parasite. Fan's studio made a fatal error in these early days. They treated this like a celebrity gossip crisis. They issued a sternly worded statement denying the allegations. They accused Kui of defamation. They hired lawyers. They acted with the arrogance of people who believed they were untouchable. They thought this was a PR war. They did not realize that the state administration of taxation had already begun sharpening its knives. They did not realize that the order had likely already come down from the highest levels of Beijing. Make an example of her. On June 3rd, the State Administration of Taxation ordered a comprehensive investigation into the entertainment industry, specifically citing the yin-yang contracts issue. The stock prices of Chinese film companies crashed. Huai Brothers, the studio that had launched Fan, saw its value plummet. The industry panicked, but Fan Bingbing stayed silent. She continued to work. She continued to exist until July 1st, 2018. This is the date that marks the beginning of the void. Fan Bingbing visited a children's hospital in Shanghai. Photos from the event show her wearing a simple white shirt, her hair tied back. She looks tired. She is not smiling with her usual radiance. There is a heaviness in her posture. Perhaps she knew. Perhaps she had received the phone call that every powerful person in China dreads. After that visit, she walked out of the hospital doors and into oblivion. For the next 3 months, the most famous woman in China effectively ceased to exist. In the UK or the US, if a person is arrested, there is a process. You are read your rights, you are taken to a station, your lawyer is called, your mugshot appears on TMZ. There is a paper trail. But in China, there is a legal mechanism known as RSDL, residential surveillance at a designated location. It is a sterile bureaucratic term for a terrifying reality. RSDL is not prison. You are not taken to a general population jail cell. Instead, you are taken to a black jail. This is often a state-owned guest house, a remodeled hotel, or a secret facility in the suburbs. The process usually begins with a sudden interception. A black car pulls up. Men in plain clothes emerge. You are told to come with them to assist with an investigation. You do not pack a bag. You do not call your mother. You simply disappear. Legally, RSDL can last for up to 6 months without the detainee seeing a lawyer or a judge. It operates in a legal gray zone designed to bypass the standard judicial protections. Survivors of this system describe a standardized architecture of psychological dismantling. The rooms are often modified with soft padding to prevent suicide attempts, not out of mercy, but because the state needs a living confession, not a dead martyr. Detainees are forced to sit in a fixed position on a small stool for up to 18 hours a day. If they move, they are reprimanded. If they sleep, they are woken up. The objective is to induce a state of exhaustion where the mind becomes pliable, where the difference between truth and fiction blurs, and where signing a confession feels like the only path to sleep. Once inside the RSDL system, you are stripped of your identity. You are given a number. You are held in a room that is designed to break the human spirit through sensory deprivation and total control. The curtains are permanently drawn to block out the sun. The lights are often kept on 24 hours a day, destroying your circadian rhythm. The walls are padded with soft material, not for comfort, but to prevent you from killing yourself by smashing your head against them. Suicide is an escape, and the state does not allow you to escape before you have confessed. 2 guards are in the room with you at all times. They sit in chairs watching you. They watch you sleep. They watch you eat. They watch you use the toilet. There is no privacy. There is no dignity. You are subjected to hours of interrogation every day. The questions are repetitive, grinding, designed to find contradictions in your story. Who else is involved? Where is the money? Who protected you? Inside this room, the contrast was brutal. A woman who just weeks ago was sipping champagne in a penthouse in Cannes. A woman used to an entourage of assistants, stylists, and drivers, catering to her every whim. Now she is alone in a padded room, wearing a generic uniform, completely cut off from the outside world. She does not know if her career is over. She does not know if her family is safe. She does not know if the public still loves her, or if they are burning her posters in the streets. This is the psychological torture of the vanishing. It is designed to remind the individual that without the state, they are nothing. While Fan sat in that room, the world outside was reacting with confusion and then horror. Her social media accounts, which had been posting daily updates to 62 million followers, went totally dark. Her birthday came and went on September 16th. Usually this would be a national event on social media with thousands of celebrities wishing her well. This year, silence. Only a handful of brave friends dared to post a message. The rest of the industry was terrified. They knew that to associate with Fan Bingbing now was to invite the gaze of the censors upon themselves. Rumors began to fill the vacuum. In Hong Kong and Taiwan, the tabloids ran wild. One report claimed she had fled to Los Angeles and was seeking asylum. Another claimed she had been arrested and chained to a chair. A darker rumor circulated that she had been liquidated, executed, to send a message to the corrupt elites. The sheer variety of these rumors proved one thing. The government's control over information was absolute. They had created a black hole in the center of the news cycle. But the erasure was not just physical, it was administrative. In September 2018, while Fan was still missing, a state-affiliated academic group published the China Film and Television Star Social Responsibility Report. It was a moral report card for the country's celebrities. The list ranked 100 stars based on their professional work, charitable actions, and personal integrity. The top stars scored high. Fan Bingbing was ranked last. Her score was not low. It was exactly 0.00. This was not a statistic. It was a signal. In the eyes of the system, her value as a human being had been reset to 0. It was a public notification to brands and investors. This asset is now toxic. International media began to take notice. The New York Times, the BBC, Time magazine, they all ran headlines asking, "Where is Fan Bingbing?" It became a diplomatic embarrassment for China. How could they claim to be a modern rule of law society when their biggest star could just be snatched off the street? But Beijing did not care about Western headlines. They cared about domestic discipline. During these 100 days of summer and early autumn, the erasure of Fan Bingbing extended beyond her physical body. It began to attack her legacy. Her name was removed from the promotional materials of upcoming movies. Brands like Montblanc and Swiss quietly removed her images from their websites. In the chaotic, neon-lit shopping districts of Shanghai and Beijing, workers were seen climbing ladders to tear down massive billboards featuring her face. It was a visual purging. It was as if the system was trying to rewrite history to say she was never here. The silence was the weapon. It was a message to every other billionaire, every other tech mogul, every other movie star in China. It said, "Look at her. Look at how high she climbed. Look at how much the world loved her. And look at how easily we can turn her off." Inside the detention facility, the pressure on Fan was mounting. We can assume, based on the outcome, that a deal was being presented. The state did not want to lock her up for life. That would be a waste of a national asset. They wanted her to bow. They wanted a confession. They wanted her to return to the public eye, not as a queen, but as a penitent sinner. They needed her to validate their power. She had to admit that she was wrong and that the party was right. She had to agree to pay a price so high it would make history. And so, as September turned to October, the negotiations in the padded room concluded. The vanished woman was preparing to reappear, but the Fan Bingbing who would emerge from the darkness would not be the same woman who went in. The Fan Ye, who declared she was the rich man, was dead. The woman who returned would be a cautionary tale in human form. On October 3rd, 2018, exactly 123 days after she vanished into the ether, Fan Bingbing returned to the world of the living. She did not return with a press conference. There were no flashing cameras, no red carpet, and no defiant interviews. Instead, her return was marked by a single digital notification that pinged on millions of phones across China. She posted a letter on Weibo. The medium was modern, but the language was ancient. To a Western reader, the letter might have sounded like a standard celebrity apology for a DUI or a scandal. But to anyone familiar with the history of the Chinese Communist Party, the text was chillingly familiar. It read like a Jiantao, a self-criticism essay required during the political purges of the 1960s. It was a document of total submission. "I have endured unprecedented pain and agony," she wrote. "I have undergone profound reflection and introspection. I feel ashamed and guilty for what I have done." But the most critical sentence, the one that signaled her complete surrender to the state, was this: "Without the good policies of the party and the state, and without the love of the people, there would be no Fan Bingbing." In that one sentence, the queen abdicated her throne. She admitted that her fame, her wealth, and her very existence were not the result of her own talent or hard work, but a gift granted by the party, a gift that could be revoked at any moment. The master fan persona was dead. In its place was a humble, repentant citizen begging for a second chance. But apologies in the adult world are rarely free. Along with the letter came the bill. The Chinese tax authorities announced that Fan Bingbing and her companies had been ordered to pay taxes and fines, totaling 883 million RMB. That is approximately 130 million US dollars. It was a staggering sum, one of the largest personal fines in history. To put it in perspective, it was roughly equivalent to the entire budget of a Marvel blockbuster movie. The terms of the penalty were brutal. To avoid criminal prosecution, to avoid being transferred from the black jail to a real prison, where she would wear an orange vest and sew footballs, she had to pay the full amount within a strict deadline. The message was clear: pay up or get locked up. Reports from Beijing in late 2018 described a frenzy of liquidation. Fan was rumored to be offloading dozens of properties in Beijing and Shanghai at fire sale prices. She sold luxury cars. She emptied her investment accounts. She essentially dismantled the financial empire she had spent 2 decades building piece by piece to buy her freedom. She paid the ransom, and because she paid, she was allowed to walk free. But the woman who walked out of detention was walking into a wasteland. The fallout was immediate and total. This is what modern cancellation looks like when it is enforced by a state apparatus. It was not just people being mean on Twitter, it was an erasure. The war film Airstrike, which she had starred in alongside Bruce Willis, was canceled entirely, never to be released in theaters. In other films, editors worked overtime to digitally remove her face from scenes or cut her storylines completely. Brands that had once paid millions to be associated with her, Montblanc, De Beers, Guerlain, terminated their contracts overnight. Her face was peeled off billboards. Her name became toxic. But the cruelest cut was yet to come. In the summer of 2019, less than a year after her release, the final pillar of her old life collapsed. Fan Bingbing and her fiancé Li Chen announced their separation. They had been the golden couple, the symbol of romance and power. Li Chen had famously stuck by her during the initial days of the scandal, but the pressure of the aftermath was seemingly too much. They announced the breakup with a philosophical post on Weibo: "We are no longer us. We are still us." It was a graceful exit, but the subtext was heartbreaking. The scandal had destroyed not just her career, but her personal life. The queen was now alone, stripped of her crown, her fortune, and her love. She was a pariah in her own country. For most people, this would be the end of the story. You take whatever money you have left, you move to a quiet villa in Switzerland or Singapore, and you hide for the rest of your life. You accept that you lost. But Fan Bingbing is made of sterner stuff. She possesses a resilience that borders on the unnatural. From 2019 to 2022, Fan Bingbing entered what we can call the wilderness years. She was subject to a soft ban. There was no official government document saying Fan Bingbing cannot work. But no director dared to cast her. No TV station dared to air her face. She was a ghost in the industry she helped to build. So, she pivoted. If she could not be an actress, a profession that requires government approval for every script and every release, she would become a merchant. She would return to the roots of her family, trade. She launched her own beauty brand, Fan Beauty Secret. It was a move that many critics mocked. They sneered that the Empress had become a shopkeeper. They laughed when they saw the great Fan Bingbing sitting in front of a ring light, holding up sheet masks, doing live streams to sell skincare products directly to consumers. It seemed like a humiliation. However, the critics failed to understand the mechanics of the Chinese market. In China, e-commerce live streaming is a multi-billion-dollar industry that dwarfs Western platforms like QVC. It is intimate, direct, and incredibly lucrative. By pivoting to this model, Fan bypassed the traditional gatekeepers. She didn't need a director to cast her. She didn't need a censor to approve her film. She only needed a smartphone and her internet connection. In one famous session, she reportedly sold over 10 million RMB worth of facial masks in just 4 minutes. She was demonstrating a new kind of power. If the state controls the cinema screens, she would monopolize the phone screens. But Fan understood something her critics did not. In the digital age, direct connection to the audience is power. The cinemas were closed to her, but the internet was porous. Her Weibo account was monitored, but not banned. She still had millions of fans who remembered her, who loved her, and who were willing to buy a face mask if it meant supporting her. She approached this new business with the same ferocious intensity she had applied to acting. She was involved in product development, in packaging, in marketing, and the numbers began to tell a different story. Fan Beauty Secret was not a vanity project, it was a juggernaut. By 2020, during the height of the pandemic when most businesses were failing, her brand was generating hundreds of millions of RMB. During the massive Double 11 shopping festival, China's version of Black Friday, her brand outsold established international giants. She was rebuilding her war chest. She was proving that while the state could take her platform, they could not take her business acumen. During these wilderness years, she also adopted a strategy of extreme humility. She engaged in charity work, specifically her Heart Ali project, which provides heart surgery for children in remote Tibet. In the past, her charity work was publicized with glossy photo shoots. Now she went quietly. Photos leaked of her in heavy parkas, praying in Buddhist temples, looking solemn and devout. She was performing penance. She was signaling to Beijing, I am a good citizen. I am contributing to common prosperity. I am no longer a threat. It was a delicate, dangerous dance. The political climate in China was getting colder. President Xi Jinping's crackdown on the entertainment industry was widening. In 2021, another superstar, Zhao Wei, Fan's co-star from My Fair Princess, was erased from the internet even more ruthlessly than Fan had been. Then came the arrest of Chris Wu. The cleansing of the industry was ongoing. Fan Bingbing was walking through a minefield, trying to survive while her colleagues were detonating all around her. She attended minor fashion events, often appearing on the red carpet but being pointedly ignored by the mainstream media cameras. She appeared on the covers of small international magazines in Vietnam and Russia and Singapore, markets that Beijing didn't care about. She was testing the fences, looking for a way out. She was like water, flowing around the obstacles, finding the cracks in the wall. By the end of 2022, it became clear that the soft ban in China was not going to be lifted anytime soon. The domestic door was shut. If she wanted to be a star again, she could not do it in the land of her birth. She would have to go into exile. She would have to do what Chinese merchants and artists have done for centuries. When the emperor's gaze became too hot, she would have to go south and she would have to go west. She began to quietly assemble a new team, a team not focused on Beijing, but on Berlin, Paris, and Hollywood. She was preparing for a second act that nobody believed was possible. The shopkeeper was preparing to put the dragon robe back on, but this time she would wear it on her own terms, in a world where the party's censors could not reach. By the dawn of 2023, Fan Bingbing had come to a cold, hard realization. The gates of the Forbidden City were not going to open. The Chinese film industry, now thoroughly remodeled under the Common Prosperity Guidelines, had no place for a fallen queen. The risk was simply too high for any domestic investor. If she wanted to act, if she wanted to reclaim her identity as an artist rather than just a beauty mogul, she would have to look beyond the Great Wall. She would have to execute a strategy of encirclement. If she could not be a star in China, she would be a star around China. Her return to the silver screen began not in Beijing, but in Berlin. In February 2023, Fan Bingbing appeared at the Berlin International Film Festival for the premiere of Green Knight. The contrast between this moment and her previous red carpet appearances was stark. In 2010 at Cannes, she had been the Dragon Lady, dripping in gold and imperial majesty. In Berlin, she wore a more somber, artistic elegance, but the real transformation was on the screen. In Green Knight, a film directed by the Chinese auteur Han Shui, but produced with Hong Kong and Korean backing, Fan did not play an empress or a superhero. She played Jin Xia, a downtrodden Chinese immigrant working at airport security in Seoul, trapped in an abusive marriage. She spoke Korean. She looked exhausted, raw, and unglamorous. It was a role that required her to strip away the vanity that had defined her career for 2 decades. Critics were stunned. The performance was gritty and undeniably powerful. It currently holds a 78% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a score far higher than many of her previous blockbusters. By taking this role, Fan was sending a signal to the global film community. I am no longer a commercial product. I am an actor. She was laundering her reputation through the purifying waters of high art. The film was not released widely in mainland China, but that didn't matter. It was released to the world. From 2024 to 2025, Fan accelerated this international pivot. She stopped chasing Hollywood blockbusters, which are often beholden to Chinese box office approval, and turned her attention to the independent art house circuit and the burgeoning markets of Southeast Asia. She understood that while Beijing controls the north, the Chinese diaspora in the south, in Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, still adored her. In June 2024, this southern strategy bore fruit in a way that was almost diplomatic in its nature. In a lavish ceremony in the historic city of Malacca, Malaysia, Fan Bingbing was conferred the title of Datuk. For a Western audience, this is roughly equivalent to being made a dame or a knight in the British system. It is a title of high nobility and social standing. She was honored for her role as the 2024 to 2025 Tourism Ambassador for Malacca. She had spent the previous year using her massive social media presence on Instagram and the newly accessible international version of TikTok to drive millions of tourists to the state. Photos of her in traditional Nyonya Kebaya dress went viral. The Datuk title was more than just a medal, it was a shield. It legitimized her as an international figure of cultural exchange. It made it harder for her to be dismissed as merely a disgraced actress. She was now a stateswoman of culture, forging alliances with governments that were friendly to, but distinct from, Beijing. She continued to push her artistic boundaries. In late 2024, she wrapped production on Small, Sharp, and Green, a magic realist short film produced by Giraffe Pictures. In this project, she delved into the surreal, playing a character navigating a dreamscape of environmental collapse and personal grief. The film is slated for the festival circuit in late 2025. Again, the choice was strategic. Short films are not commercial risks. They are statements of intent. She was aligning herself with the avant-garde, distancing herself further from the corrupt, money-obsessed image of 2018. She has successfully rebuilt her career, but she has done so by creating a parallel reality. In the eyes of the world, she is an acclaimed actress and a beauty mogul, a datuk, and an international icon. In the eyes of the Chinese state, she remains a cautionary tale, a figure to be tolerated, but kept in the shadows. She has achieved what very few people in history have managed. She has outmaneuvered a cancellation by a totalitarian state. She did it not by fighting back, but by moving sideways. She built a new floor when the old one was pulled out from under her. She proved that while you can strip a star of her domestic platform, you cannot confiscate her talent, and you cannot extinguish her survival instinct. As she rebuilds her empire, Fan Bingbing is busy. She is serving as a juror for the main competition at the Berlin International Film Festival, a role that grants her the power to judge others, a subtle reclamation of authority. She is developing a line of luxury skincare for the Southeast Asian market. She is reading scripts from French and Korean directors. The vanishing is over. The reappearance is complete. But the story of Fan Bingbing is no longer just a biography of an actress. It has become something much larger. It has become a case study in power, fear, and the limits of control. It leaves us with a final lingering question, not about where she went, but about what her journey tells us about the world we live in. To view the story of Fan Bingbing as merely a celebrity tax scandal is to misunderstand the fundamental shifts occurring in the geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. Her disappearance and subsequent resurrection serve as a Rosetta Stone for understanding the new era of China under President Xi Jinping. It is a story that transcends the tabloids and touches upon the very nature of power, freedom, and the relationship between the individual and the state. When we step back and look at the wreckage left in the wake of 2018, we see that Fan Bingbing was not a random casualty. She was a sacrifice. In anthropology, a sacrifice is often the most prized object of a society, offered up to appease a higher power or to signal a change in seasons. Fan was the most prized object of China's Gilded Age, a period of unbridled capitalism, individualism, and Western-facing ambition. By bringing her down, the state signaled the end of that summer and the beginning of a much colder, stricter winter. Her fall coincided almost perfectly with the rollout of the Common Prosperity Campaign. This political doctrine argues that the excesses of the past decades, the billionaires, the tech moguls, the superstar actresses, have created a dangerous imbalance. The wealth gap had become a threat to the party's legitimacy. To fix it, the tall poppies had to be cut down. Fan Bingbing was the tallest poppy in the field. Her punishment was designed to be performative. The $130 million fine was not just about revenue, it was about humiliation. It was a public demonstration that in the new China, no amount of money can buy you immunity. We must also consider the chilling effect this case has cast over the Chinese entertainment industry. Before 2018, Chinese cinema was rushing to mimic Hollywood. It was loud, brash, and star-driven. Today, the industry is fundamentally different. Scripts are now vetted with extreme ideological rigor. Actors are terrified of standing out. The Fanye persona, the arrogant, independent master, is extinct. It has been replaced by the virtuous artist, a celebrity who spends more time studying party ideology than reading Vogue. We saw this fear manifest in the years following Fan's detention. Other stars, like Vicky Zhao Wei, faced even harsher erasures, disappearing from the internet entirely in 2021 without explanation. The message has been received. The party is the only true star allowed to shine. Everyone else is merely a supporting actor, and supporting actors can be replaced. For the Western observer, this story offers a jarring lesson in the fragility of rights. In the West, we operate under the assumption that fame and wealth provide a layer of armor. We look at stars like Johnny Depp or Shakira, who face legal battles but remain fundamentally free, their voices amplified by their controversies. We assume that if you have 60 million followers, you cannot simply be snatched off the street. Fan Bingbing proved that assumption wrong. She proved that in an authoritarian system, the social contract is unilateral. The state gives and the state takes away. Her 63 million followers were powerless to save her. Her contracts with Louis Vuitton were powerless to protect her. When the Leviathan turned its head, she was as vulnerable as the poorest migrant worker in Beijing. Furthermore, her story forces us to reevaluate the concept of cancellation. In the West, cancellation is a social phenomenon, a loss of reputation driven by public outcry. In China, cancellation is an administrative procedure. It is the unpersoning, a modern version of the Roman practice of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. The state attempted to scrub her face from movies, to remove her name from history books. The fact that they failed, that she found a way to survive and return, is a testament to her individual will, but the attempt itself reveals the terrifying scope of the state's ambition. They do not just want to control the present, they want to edit the past. So, where does this leave Fan Bingbing today? She stands now as a figure of complex tragedy and triumph. She is no longer the queen who ruled the red carpets of 2015 with effortless arrogance. That woman died in the RSDL facility in Jiangsu. The woman who exists today as a survivor, she is wealthier than most of us will ever be, yes. She is free to travel to Paris and Berlin. She holds titles of nobility in Malaysia and awards from Taiwan. But she carries a visible scar. If you look closely at her recent interviews, the playfulness is gone. The spark of rebellion that defined her early career has been replaced by a steeliness, a guarded precision in her speech. She knows that she is living on borrowed time. She knows that she is being watched. She has learned the lesson that all survivors of trauma learn. Safety is an illusion. Her journey from the pinnacle of fame to the depths of a black jail and back again is a uniquely modern epic. It is a story that could only happen in the 21st century, at the intersection of hypercapitalism and digital authoritarianism. She tried to be a global citizen in a world that is rapidly fragmenting back into walled gardens. She tried to be an individual in a system that demands a collective. Fan Bingbing's vanishing was not just a mystery, it was a warning. It demonstrated that in the contest between the individual and the state, the house always wins. But her return, her quiet, determined, clawing climb back to relevance, offers a counter-argument. It suggests that while you can break a person's career, and you can strip them of their wealth, you cannot easily destroy the human desire to be seen. She remains to this day the most fascinating woman in China, not because of the roles she plays on screen, but because of the roles she played in history. She is the empress who was dethroned, the billionaire who was bankrupted, and the ghost who walked back into the light. In the end, perhaps the question, "Where is Fan Bingbing?" is no longer the right one to ask. We know where she is. She is everywhere. In the beauty products on a teenager's vanity in Shanghai, in the cinema screens of Berlin, in the gossip columns of Hong Kong. The better question, the one that should haunt us as the screen fades to black, is this. In a world where a woman this powerful can be erased in the blink of an eye, how safe are the rest of us? She was the diamond. She was the star. She was the master. And for 100 days, she was nothing. That is the story of Fan Bingbing.